Okay, and then really fast for the worksheet today that we did. For the first one, older people do experience alcohol to a greater extent than people who are younger because they lose water in their body. So number one is true. Number two is also true. What you expect to happen usually does happen with alcohol. So if you expect to be happier, to be have more energy, you usually do have those things with alcohol. It intensifies your emotions. And so if you're feeling sad and you drink alcohol, you're going to feel even sadder. It intensifies whatever you're feeling. Number three, you should not let a person sleep it off. If they're drunk and they can't be woken up, it's an emergency. They're in danger of dying. So you do not want to let them alone. You want to check their breathing. You want to try to wake them up. If you can't, you need to get help for them because they're in danger of going into a coma, choking. They're in a serious condition at that point. So don't let them alone for anything. Number four, splashing water on a drunk person can make them have a heart attack. So go into shock. And so you should not splash water on a person who's really drunk and passed out. That will really hurt them. You can't really do this sober up a person who's that drunk. There's nothing you can do. You can't give them coffee. You can't splash water on them to make them wake up. They're not going to. It will only just further tax their heart if you do those things to them. Number five, that's true. A person on their side, if they're really drunk and they're not waking up, laying on their side is going to help them because they could choke if they're on their back. So definitely do that as soon as you can if they're really sick or if they're not waking up. Number six, yes, you should call 911 immediately if you see that they're vomiting, not responding to what you're saying, if they're breathing slow, they have blue lips. Those are all signs you should call 911 immediately. Number seven, poison control can help you. So if you don't know what to call 911 or not, poison control can walk you through what to do for the person. And you can get immunity for both places, poison control and 911. So you can call either one and get immunity in those situations. And that's what number 8, I think, is talking about. So number 8 is true.
Why do they give you immunity?
They want to have you help people who are in danger of dying. You know,
Okay,
people.
Yeah, but so they do help them, and then if they get okay afterwards, you're fine.
Yeah, unless they could prove that you were at fault for something. You know, like if you were an adult and you gave alcohol to a minor and you're the adult who called 911 and they realize that you're the reason why this person got sick, then you could be liable for that. But if you're an underage person in a party with other people there and your friend gets really sick and you call 911, you won't be held liable for that. They won't charge you with minor imposition of alcohol in that situation. But if you went, you know, if you had marijuana on you or if you went and drove a car, that's a different story. You would get liable for those charges, but not for underage drinking if you called for help.
So what about cops coming and busting those parties?
Mm-hmm.
Why would that be any different?
Well, that's different because like nobody asked them to come to help somebody. Like cops just showed up because there was a noise violation or, you know. But it's different if you call 911 because somebody needs help. That's a totally different situation. And you have to stay there too. So if you were to call 911, you can't leave. You have to stay until they show up. But you are immune in that situation. So that takes care of 8 and 9. And then number 10, don't give them coffee. Because or water. Neither of those. Don't give them anything to drink. If they have alcohol poisoning, they shouldn't drink anything. Anything that they drink or eat, they could choke on. So they should have no fluids at all until they're safe.
Wait, could you read the question for
number 10? Coffee should not be given to a person experiencing alcohol poisoning because caffeine can cause heart problems. That's true. But a glass of water can make them feel better. Well, glass of water, if you give a glass of water to somebody who's had alcohol poisoning, they're going to choke on it most likely. They can't really swallow anything when they have alcohol poisoning. And so they could choke to death on water. Doesn't mean they're passed out. I mean, it could be a lot of different things. They could be awake, but unresponsive to you. And so they could be really out of it. And like they have their eyes open, they're sitting up, but they're not able to engage with you. They're not able to talk to you. Or they're throwing up a lot. That would also be a sign of alcohol poisoning. Or if they have blue skin or breathing really slowly. So they might be awake, but it's clear that they are really feeling sick. Then water should be given to them in that situation. So if they're actively throwing up, If they're feeling really sick, you should not give them water. Now, if they're well below, 0.2 BAC, then water would be fine to get them. But alcohol poisoning, when you're above 0.2 BAC, at that point, it's really dangerous to drink anything until you're below that again. Any questions about those? Okay, so let's get to caffeine. It shouldn't be too long.
I did have a question though. So if you take like one sip of like beer or something and you need to go driving and someone pulls you over, could they find that on the breathalyzer or whatever test?
Not likely, not one sip. Yeah, that's not very likely at all. You need a lot more to register that. Yeah.
At least one drink.
I mean, it depends on the person, how much they weigh, if they eat anything. I mean, there's a lot of different things that go into it. But yeah, I would say one drink would be enough to detect something. If you drive pretty soon afterwards. But after 30 minutes, 40 minutes, probably won't be detectable at that point.
Wait, so but if you get 0.06, they won't arrest you, right?
I know. Well, 0.08 is a legal limit. For adults, legal limit is 0.08. So if you're below that, they would not arrest you on its own. But if you're driving erratically, then they would arrest you anyway, even if you're below 0.08. If you're not driving safely, they can still arrest you. So it depends on how you're driving along with your blood alcohol levels. But if you're a minor, anything above 0, you're going to get arrested for. So even 0.01, you'll get arrested for that. And, people sometimes buy breathalyzers so they can see where they're at before they drive. And they're not that expensive, but might be a good idea. Might save lives. But they're not, they're easy to find on Amazon. They're so they're pretty common. Yeah. All right, so caffeine is psychoactive. It affects how your mind works. Now, a lot of people, feel like, coffee and caffeine are not healthy for you. They kind of have a reputation of being unhealthy. They're actually usually pretty healthy for a person. Now, of course, if you have lots of sugar in the coffee, lots of cream, then, that can become unhealthy. But coffee on its own is actually very healthy for you. Now, of course, you can overdo the caffeine too, which can be a problem. But if you drink it in moderation, it has a lot of good benefits for a person. So, of course, we know it relieves drowsiness. It makes you feel more alert, helps you focus better. It improves your performance, both physical and mental performance. And so people will take this before sports events. Athletes will take energy drinks because it actually does help them be stronger and increases their endurance. Now, it's only to a certain extent, though. So a lot of athletes, what they'll do to make the impact, really measurable before a game, they won't have much caffeine for a few days, and then they'll have a good amount of caffeine the day of the game, and that gives them a good effect from the caffeine. Like you're drinking moderate every day, like 2 cups of coffee every day, it's not going to really make a huge difference before a game if you have 2 cups of coffee. But if you went from having no cups of coffee to 2 cups of coffee the day of the game, then you are going to feel a difference and feel more energetic. It's most effective, though, if you take caffeine in small amounts throughout the day. Instead of like a large dose right away, having a small amount throughout the day keeps your energy level up.
So like not a shot of espresso?
Yeah, it depends on the person. But for most people, if you just take a lot right away, you're going to get energetic for, an hour or so, but then you're going to have a crash. And but if you can balance it out, then you're going to feel like you're going to get a good amount of energy throughout the day.
Isn't caffeine map like actually scientifically proven?
Like,
do you know, it's like where you like drink your coffee and then you like take a 20-minute nap right away before the caffeine
Oh.
and then you wake up and you have like a
I have heard about that. Yeah, now it makes sense. You're resting and it energizes you too, along with the caffeine. I'd not heard about that, but that does make a lot of sense.
so
Yeah.
it is like scientifically.
I'll have to look at, I haven't heard of that, but
Wait, do you know how much like caffeine a shot of espresso is?
about 90 milligrams, about the same.
Okay.
They're roughly the same. It depends on the coffee. Some coffee can be 200 or 300 milligrams, but most
Okay.
coffee is about 100, 120 milligrams.
So if you have 2 shots
So-
of espresso a day, is that like a lot of caffeine?
That's like 2 cups of coffee.
Okay.
So it's like 200 milligrams or so, generally. So that's not a lot. That's a moderate amount. So caffeine has been shown to help with type 2 diabetes, help lower the risk of diabetes. Caffeine burns fat and burns sugar. It helps your metabolism. It helps your heart stay healthy in moderate amounts. It helps certain kinds of cancer. It's an antioxidant, and so it helps prevent certain cancers. Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's. It lowers the risk of those diseases too. Alzheimer's by 2/3, 65% lower risk of having Alzheimer's if you have 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day. So it helps with brain health.
Is that because, not from the actual chemical,
Mhm.
but because after drinking coffee, you're more likely to do something?
Well, it's a few different things. I mean, that's just one factor that goes into it. But definitely caffeine helps with your energy level. And so you are going to be more active, which definitely helps with Alzheimer's risk. But it also, like it shows on this last part, it increases blood flow to the brain. And that's the biggest reason why you have Alzheimer's is you have less blood flow to the brain. And so caffeine increases blood flow to the brain, which keeps your neurons from dying. It also increases the amount of cerebrospinal fluid to your brain. And so it helps clear out harmful proteins as well, which is what causes Alzheimer's, is protein buildup. So that's the real reason why. So in moderation, caffeine is very good. Of course, everybody's different as far as how much becomes good to being bad for you, but it can interfere with your sleep, and then that of course can be a problem. But if you still sleep at night, a good amount, then the amount of caffeine you have in a day is actually helpful, not harmful to you. Caffeine is a white powder, and as I mentioned, it helps burn fat. And so 200 milligrams of caffeine, that's about 2 cups of coffee. But when given that amount of caffeine, between 1 to 2 cups of coffee worth, people burn extra 60 to 200 calories a day. And so it stimulates the burning of fat. You might have heard about, that they have green coffee beans that people take to lose weight. There's different kinds of pills that people take with that mostly made of coffee.
Where does that
Which-
come from?
Where does what come from?
Caffeine.
The caffeine, oh, just like this right here,
Yeah.
from the coffee plant. They just purify it from the coffee bean. And they can make it synthetically too. I mean, so they could also make it in a laboratory. So either way, but generally you're gonna get it from coffee. So caffeine works because it has the same structure molecularly as adenosine. So caffeine has a hexagon with a pentagon attached to it, just like adenosine does. And so they fit in the same receptor sites. Adenosine makes you sleepy. And so when adenosine goes to a receptor in your brain, it slows down your brain functioning. And that's what you feel as drowsiness. But caffeine can fit in there, but it doesn't activate the receptor. And so it blocks adenosine from coming in and making you feel sleepy. Throughout the day, adenosine builds up. So as you do things throughout the day, you get more and more adenosine. And when it builds up enough, you're going to want to go to sleep. You get too drowsy to really do anything else. But what caffeine does is it blocks adenosine from going into the receptors, and so you don't feel tired. Now, what the brain realizes this though, and so it makes more receptors to counteract caffeine's effect. And so if you drink a lot of caffeine, you're gonna have a lot of receptors for adenosine to try to counteract the caffeine for blocking the receptors. So if you drink a lot of caffeine a day, there are lots of receptors that are blocked. You stop drinking coffee for one day, the receptors are now unblocked, you get a lot of adenosine to your receptors, you're gonna feel very, very sleepy the next day. And so caffeine withdrawal makes you feel awful. You have a big crash because you have a lot of receptors now that are free to latch onto adenosine, and you're gonna feel awful. And you're gonna have a bad headache. But after a few days, they're taken away. So the body realizes it can adjust again. And so it's going to then pull away the receptors, and you're gonna feel better after a few days off caffeine. But it takes a few days to adjust to that. So it's better not to go cold turkey if you're trying to cut back on coffee. It's better to just, if you're going from like 2 cups to, you want to get down to no cups of coffee a day, you should go from 2 to 1.5 to 1 to half. You don't want to just go from 2 cups to no cups of coffee. You're going to feel really bad if you do that. So it's better to kind of pace yourself. That way you don't feel the effects of caffeine withdrawal.
What if you like don't have coffee every single day, but you have it most of the time, so then you skip a few days?
Mhm.
Will you feel that the same way or?
I mean, it depends on how much you're drinking a day. If you're doing other things with caffeine besides coffee, I mean, chocolate has caffeine in it. Excedrin has caffeine in it. Of course, soft drinks and tea have caffeine. So if you have no other caffeine source, that's gonna be rough on your body. To go like say like 1 cup of coffee a day or 2 cups of coffee a day to have no cups the next day, that's you're not gonna feel good.
Oh, really?
I mean, caffeine though does stay in your body for a while though. It has a long half-life. And so you could actually still have caffeine in your body the next day after you drink coffee, especially if, I mean, it depends on your metabolism, but if you have a slower metabolism, you can have caffeine stay in your body for a while after you drink coffee. And so it is possible that you can still feel the effects of caffeine the next day afterwards. So some people might feel okay, but in general, they don't. But it is possible that you might not feel bad because the caffeine's still in your system. Even after 24 hours, it's still in your system.
Why is it that some people can drink caffeine like 2 hours before going to bed and it's fine, but some people can't have it like 12 hours?
Yeah, that's to do with their genes. I mean, mostly I mean, their body weight too, how much they've eaten, those all go into it. But genes is the biggest factor as far as how much caffeine you can have in a day. So there's the 23andMe test tells you the genes you have for caffeine, about how much caffeine you can have a day before you feel bad. But it's really just related to your biology and how your body can process the caffeine. Caffeine gives you adrenaline, which gives you energy, increases your heart rate, and so that helps with your performance with athletics. Dopamine secreted, it makes you feel good. So it's addictive because of that, but not on the same level as other drugs. But caffeine addiction is a real thing, but it's easier to withdraw from caffeine than other kinds of drugs. So it is a safe chemical, even though it is addictive. Because the effects of it are not that harmful to you, and in fact, a lot of them are beneficial, it's not a dangerous drug. Now, it can be in large amounts. But the amount that you usually drink in a day, it's not dangerous. Now, for women who are pregnant, though, they need to limit the caffeine. About 2 cups of coffee a day is safe, but anything above that can become dangerous for the baby. So 200 milligrams is about 2 cups of coffee, and that's a safe level of caffeine. Of course, to be really safe, you can have less than that, but that's been shown, 200 milligrams has been shown to be fine. Now, you can have too much caffeine, though, and you can be intoxicated with caffeine, and that can lead to insomnia, a red face, upset stomach, rapid heartbeat, heart that skips a beat. You feel irritated. You can't focus. You're not making sense when you talk. So about 500 milligrams of caffeine, which is about 5 cups of coffee, is a recommended limit for daily use. For teens, it's recommended about 1 cup of coffee a day. 100 milligrams of caffeine is recommended for teens. But for adults, about 200 milligrams is recommended amount. Of course, it varies from person to person. Some people can have a lot more and feel fine. Others can only have a little bit and they still don't feel good. So you know your own limit. You can just tell by how you feel. But if you can't sleep at night, then you know you've had too much.
Can caffeine, like, can it make people sleepy, other people who get slept?
Yeah, it does that.
Yeah, it definitely can happen. Yeah, that can happen. So like you drink a cup of coffee and you feel tired afterwards. I mean, some drugs have that effect where they have the opposite effect on people. It has to do with the enzymes in your brain, your genes, and you can certainly have that happen.
Yeah, that's weird. So how much caffeine is in coffee versus like Monster?
So coffee, it depends on where you're getting it from. Most coffee, about 100 milligrams of caffeine in coffee, but like Starbucks coffee, 300 milligrams easily, 400 milligrams. I mean, they brew really strong coffee at Starbucks. So you're getting maybe 3 to 4 cups of coffee and 1 cup of coffee at Starbucks. So it depends on how they brew it, and that makes a huge difference in how much caffeine you're going to get. But on average, about 100 milligrams of caffeine. Monster, I think I have it on here. Yeah, 480 milliliters. Let's see how much caffeine is. 160 caffeine. 100, so that's 1.5 cups of coffee about. So, and that's 16 ounces. So that's like 2 cups. So in 2 cups of Monster, so it's like almost like half the strength of coffee.
But it has a lot more sugar.
That's a lot of sugar, yeah. Yeah. So Monster is it's not that strong compared to coffee. Okay, did we already go through that? So withdrawal symptoms, if you stop drinking caffeine, you're gonna have headache. That's the biggest symptom of caffeine. Bad headaches, feeling sleepy, difficulty concentrating. So you have a caffeine crash, where it's just, because you'll let adenosine go into your brain and you're going to feel very drowsy from that. The only way to get through it is just to stop having caffeine. So if you want to, for a reason, have less caffeine in your diet, the only way to get through this would be to just stop drinking caffeine in small amounts. You don't want to just go from 200 milligrams a day to no milligrams a day of caffeine. You want to taper off slowly. So espresso can be 70 to 90 milligrams. This is 70 on here. It can be to 90 milligrams for an espresso shot, but that's about the same as a cup of coffee. I mean, again, give or take. It depends on how they're brewed, but coffee can be easily 400 milligrams of caffeine in a cup. It just depends on how it's made. Monster, 160 milligrams of caffeine, but this is 16 ounces, so that's 2 cups. And so it's half the strength of coffee about. Red Bull, 80 milligrams. Mountain Dew, 90 milligrams and 20 ounces. Coke in 20 ounces is 60 milligrams, and 12 ounces is 35 milligrams of caffeine. So not very much in Coke. And this chart gives you an idea of how much you should have before you get irritated, before you have insomnia. Again, for teens, it's recommended to have about 1 cup of coffee a day, and then for adults, about 2 cups of coffee a day. But the average amount of coffee drink a day for adults is about 3 to 4 cups. So the lethal dose of caffeine is quite a lot, and it's hard to physically drink that much. It's about 3,000 milligrams to 10,000 milligrams, depending on how much you weigh, how much food you've had in your body. So it's hard to drink that much. Now, caffeine powder is usually how people die from caffeine overdoses. It's usually intentional. It's usually not accidental. It can be, but it's only about 100 cases in the past 2 decades of caffeine, people dying from caffeine overdose, and most are not accidental. Most of the time, and if it is, it's usually with caffeine powder. It's not usually with drinks. You can't really physically drink that much to go to the point. Now you can get sick, you can feel really sick, but to get to a lethal dose, it's almost impossible to drink that much unless you're dealing with caffeine powder, which people can put in their drinks sometimes, or caffeine pills.
Can you snort caffeine and have it at the same time?
I mean, people have done that, but that is incredibly dangerous, and that is one way you could die from that. I mean, if you're doing that, that could definitely, that could be really serious. So that's more of the, that would be a really bad idea. You have 5-hour energy drinks, 200 milligrams of caffeine, 230 milligrams of caffeine in one of those. So that's about 2 cups of coffee. There's also decaf ones, which have vitamin B, which gives you energy too. So there's no caffeine, but you still get energy from this one.
Those things are so weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, it's on the verge of being sweet.
They mostly add vitamin B to energy drinks, and that helps with energy as well. So niacin's vitamin B3, vitamin B6, taurine, an amino acid that can help with athletic and mental performance. And so those are some of the ones that can help with caffeine and help you feel more energetic and focus better. Okay, really quickly, I'm going to show you a video about how caffeine works in the brain, and then we'll stop today for notes. No,
What do tea?
Drinks, chocolate, cola, and coffee have in common. They all contain caffeine, the most popular psychoactive drug in the world. Almost everyone knows firsthand how effective caffeine is at keeping you awake. But how does it do it? Listen in to this episode of Medicurio to explore the history, mechanism, and surprising medical uses of caffeine. Humans and caffeine have had a long history together. The drinking of tea began almost 5,000 years ago in ancient China, while the drinking of coffee began around 1,000 years ago in Arabia. In both civilizations, caffeine became an integral part of their cultures. Tea and coffee arrived in Europe around the same time in the 16th century and likely caused a revolution of knowledge and technology in Western civilization. This was because before caffeine was introduced, due to the unsanitary water conditions, Europeans often drank weak beer and wine throughout the day instead of water. The alcohol sterilized any germs, but also made people tipsy. You can probably imagine how that would have affected productivity of workers in Europe. When coffee became popular, not only did it allow people to work energetically, it also popularized coffee houses, where people had serious discussions about current events over a cup of coffee, resulting in philosophy, science, and politics, all advancing in leaps and bounds. Without caffeine, Western civilization may very well be a lot less developed than it is now. It was in the 1800s when caffeine was finally isolated from coffee, leading to extensive research on the drug. Finally, in the 1960s, scientists discovered how caffeine prevents sleepiness. But to understand its mechanism, first we need to figure out what is going on inside our brain to make us fall asleep. Cells in our body, such as neurons, break down a molecule called adenosine triphosphate for energy. One of its breakdown products is adenosine. Therefore, as the brain uses up energy throughout the day, adenosine levels steadily increase inside the neurons, leading to some adenosine exiting the neurons, which can bind to adenosine receptors to cause sleepiness. This is a very useful mechanism. High adenosine levels in the brain indicate that the brain has been very active and needs to rest, so adenosine will make you fall asleep. Specifically, adenosine has two effects, depending on what type of adenosine receptor it activates. If adenosine activates an A1 receptor, which are found on neurons that keep the brain awake, those neurons become less active. If adenosine activates an A2A receptor, which are found on neurons that initiate sleep, those neurons become more active. The combined activation of these two receptors, a weaker wake signal and a stronger sleep signal, as well as a variety of other hormones, are responsible for making you fall asleep. During sleep, the brain can replenish its energy reserves and begins to eliminate adenosine. Eventually, not enough adenosine is left in the brain to activate adenosine receptors, so you wake up feeling refreshed. The structures of caffeine and adenosine are very similar, which means that caffeine can also bind to adenosine receptors. However, since adenosine and caffeine are not exactly the same, caffeine cannot activate those receptors. All it does is compete with adenosine for the receptors, making it more difficult for adenosine to activate those receptors to cause sleepiness. This is how caffeine makes you feel more alert, essentially by decreasing the sensitivity of your neurons to adenosine. Caffeine's effect only lasts for 2 to 4 hours though, depending on how fast your body breaks down caffeine, which is mainly determined by genetics. Once your body breaks down the caffeine, adenosine can once again bind easily to its receptors to cause sleepiness. If you ingest caffeine on a daily basis, you may have started with drinking 1 cup of coffee a day, and eventually moved on to 3 or 4 a day to have the same feeling of alertness. This is known as caffeine tolerance and often happens to people who are chronic coffee drinkers. This may be due to your neurons synthesizing more adenosine receptors to compensate for the receptors blocked by caffeine. Therefore, more caffeine is needed to block those additional receptors. If a chronic caffeine user suddenly stops taking caffeine, since there are now so many adenosine receptors, the sleep-inducing effects of adenosine may intensify. Therefore, some users may experience withdrawal symptoms such as fatigue, drowsiness, difficulty concentrating, and irritability, the opposite of caffeine's effects. To avoid these unpleasant feelings, these people will continue to take caffeine. This results in a mild physical dependence on the drug, but not severe enough to be classified as a true addiction. Caffeine is nowhere near as addictive and life-ruining as other stimulants like cocaine and methamphetamines. These withdrawal symptoms can last up to a week until the number of adenosine receptors returns to normal, And you can minimize these symptoms by slowly weaning yourself off of caffeine rather than stopping abruptly. Adenosine receptors are also found outside the brain, particularly in the heart and kidneys. Just like how activating A1 receptors in wake-stimulating neurons decreases their activity, activating A1 receptors in the heart and kidneys also decreases their activity. The heart slows down, while less blood is filtered through the kidneys, leading to less urine production. Just like in the brain, activating A1 receptors is a way to give these organs a rest as well, as both heart beating and urine production consume energy. When these A1 receptors are blocked by caffeine, the opposite occurs. Heart rate increases and more urine is produced, symptoms you may experience after a few cups of coffee. For people who have ingested a large amount of caffeine, they may experience uncomfortable symptoms such as headache, dizziness, and insomnia from over-alertness, jitteriness from high heart rate, and dehydration from increased urine production. However, caffeine is generally a safe drug. It is very difficult to overdose on caffeine. Here are the caffeine levels in common caffeine-containing substances. For caffeine to be lethal to an average adult, 10 grams of it must be ingested within a few hours, which is the equivalent of around 100 cups of coffee. A few words of caution though. Children should avoid caffeine, as it is still unknown what kind of effects caffeine has on a developing brain. And if you are constantly using caffeine to avoid sleep, stop. Adequate sleep and rest are important for healthy brain function. Aside from its stimulatory effects, caffeine also has some medicinal effects, though its mechanism there is not well understood. Caffeine is commonly found mixed with NSAIDs such as acetaminophen and aspirin because somehow caffeine can enhance their pain-killing properties. This is particularly useful in treating pain from migraines. Even more interesting is that recent research has found that moderate daily caffeine intake seems to prevent various neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. It is truly exciting that such a common drug like caffeine may be the key to preventing the devastating neurodegenerative diseases that are affecting so many people right now. So the next time you drink a cup of coffee or tea, realize that you are taking in a drug that not only played a huge role in human civilization in the past, but may be an important medical drug in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on Medicurium.
All right, we have like 3 minutes left, so if you just want to sit tight in here until the bell rings. But make sure you have your study guides for the chapter 5, 6, 7. And then along with the drug study guide for your final exam. Tomorrow we'll have a quiz over the study guide. Today, again, as long as you pay attention in class, it should not be a hard quiz. Just look at the big picture ideas. Any questions about that? Quiz tomorrow?
Okay.
It's going to be over. It's going to be about, I haven't made it up yet, but I would guess about 5 to 7 short answer questions along with multiple choice questions, similar to ones we had on the worksheets. Short answer questions would be things like, give 3 reasons why you shouldn't smoke marijuana, that kind of thing, where it's just the big picture things, where it's just the general ideas and reasons why certain drugs are harmful to you. So statistics, I mean, you can look at the trends of them, but don't memorize the numbers so much.
How much is the 23andMe genetic test cost?
It depends. There's some sales going on where it's not too much, but generally it's $200 for everything. You can get just the ancestry for $100 or just the health for $100. But if you want health, traits, and ancestry, it's like $200 full price. But there's different sales going on where it's like $100 for everything. Like right now is the best time to get it. They have the best sales at this point.
And when does it end?
I'm not sure. Probably pretty soon.
Do you think that they sell information? I know that they.
Well, they say they're not supposed to. So if that were found that they did, that'd be a huge lawsuit.
I feel like they probably do.
Do what?
They probably do.
Well, I mean, they would have incentive not to though, because they say they don't. And so if they actually were to be found that they did, that would be a huge lawsuit. They go to business. That would be the end of their company.
I think
So-
they probably can make a lot of money.
Yeah, but once they have the lawsuit, then they're gone. Then they lose all their money. So I don't think they'd risk that. That's a huge risk to take. I'm not sure if they would do that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a possibility that they would do that. I just don't know how likely that would be because that would just be, that'd be the end of their company if they were found out. And eventually they're gonna be found out. If they can't go on like that for too long before they're discovered. So I don't know. I did the test. I thought it was fine to take. But you know, I don't have a reason not to trust them.
Do you think they make any of it up?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That'd be in the lawsuit too if they did. I mean, if they were found to be making things up.
Well,
I mean-
nobody else knows what it means either, and then they make something up.
Well, what they do, I mean, so there's lots of genes that they have sequenced, and so everybody agrees that, you know, because they look at the code, right? You know, you got A, G, C, T, and you can see that. And so they show you your sequence of nucleotides. And they say, based on your nucleotide sequence, this is the gene that you have. And everybody, all the scientists agree that that is what the gene is that you have. And so it's pretty transparent as far as what they're looking at. They're pretty open about what they're seeing on your genes. And what I did, the test I did, it confirmed everything I knew about myself and my family. And so I don't know if they're making it up because like everything they said was right.
Thank you.
So I think that's pretty trustworthy. Let's see. Good day.